This episode of Vintage Stormfront Freaks has been previously recorded.
And, I'm very excited because Janice, I've admired you from afar.
Aww.
For me, I'm very excited to get a chance to meet you, sort of in digital world. But anyway, we're just so happy to have you here tonight. And
Well,
I know it's tough.
I feel the same way about you, my dear, because, as weather people, I know myself before getting to Fox, I watched the Weather Channel all the time. And you were one of my favorites. So this is a big, love fest today.
It is
about you.
I love you, Janice. I love it. We love your energy, as I said on Twitter. It's like just wonderful. Anyway, so a little bit about Janice. If you guys didn't know, she's a native of Toronto and Ottawa, Ontario. She began her career working as a morning show host. Boy, you have been mornings for a long time.
Yeah.
And a reporter at an Ottawa-based radio station. I'm assuming it's Ches FM or?
No, it's Shay.
Oh, excuse me.
That's
okay. Oui.
It's Shay 106. But I don't fault you for that because any normal person would say it's like Ches.
Only normal. I love it. Okay. All right. So in 97, Janice became an on-camera weather forecaster at station CBOT. She became the news editor and an entertainment reporter for Imus in the morning, and then joined Fox Network in January of 2004. Right now, she's a senior meteorologist at Fox News and can be seen weekday mornings very early, sometimes at 5 a.m. or maybe even earlier on Fox and Friends, and was inducted. This is really cool. Not many people have been inducted into the Meteorologists Hall of Fame on January 1st, 2017 in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Yeah, woo. Also authored a series of children's books titled Freddie the Frogcaster. And I have to say, Janice, that I was excited about these children's books. And, anybody that has kids, there's a lot of, young meteorologists who have children. And I think this book is these are such great books. Tell us a little bit about what made you think about writing books. Was it because of your children or what got you started? And how did you come up with Freddie the Frogcaster?
Well, when I started at Fox, we had someone there named John Kasich, who is actually the governor of Ohio. And he had a show on Fox News on the weekends, and he was a great guy. And when I first got there, I remember he had a book released. And he came up to me in the hallway and he was like, Janice Dean, my girls are terrified of thunderstorms. You need to write a children's book series on thunderstorms or weather, because I think, kids are afraid of it. Right. I thought to myself, that is a good idea.
Thanks for the idea.
Yes. So John Kasich has been bothering me that he deserves like 20% of all the proceeds of Freddie.
20?
That's a lot, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe the governor thing is not paying him well, but so I'll always be grateful for him because he put that light bulb in my head. But I didn't really start thinking about it until a few years later, when I really got serious about doing weather, because when I first started at Fox, I was, a weather forecaster. I didn't have the meteorology background, and I actually did it opposite to a lot of meteorologists. When I got to Fox and they said, will you do the weather? And I said yes, and I realized that this was going to be more of a career. I went back to school, and I did online courses with Mississippi State, which a lot of broadcasters do. It took me 3 years to complete the program, and then I applied for my AMS seal. So I wanted to get the background, the education background, before I started tackling all these other projects. So that was really important to me. And I will tell people, I tell kids when I go out to schools about writing books. I first approached HarperCollins. HarperCollins is a part of Fox News and part of the News Corp empire. And they liked the idea of weather books, but I had a couple of ideas that they didn't really like. So I got a rejection letter, a couple of them. Like, we like the idea of children's weather books, but we don't necessarily like your story ideas. And this first story idea was a child, a girl that was afraid of thunderstorms. So long story short, I found a publisher, Regnery Kids, that loved the idea and worked with me to find a character. I love frogs. I also read something that frogs are nature's natural weather forecasters. They will croak louder when they feel changes in the atmosphere. So I thought, my gosh, that's a no-brainer. And then I started thinking about, okay, well, you know, when I first got to Fox, they called me a foxcaster. So I thought, okay, foxcaster, I can't do that. The groundhog is already taken. But I really love frogs. So I thought frogcaster. And then I started thinking about names like, I started with Al Croker, but
Oh my God.
but I knew that might not go over so well. So then I made the character into Sal Croker, and then still it didn't sound right. And then I went to Sally Croker and made her a female role model for Freddie. And she's sort of the, you know, she's been at the Frog News Network for many years. So she's kind of the, the seasoned broadcaster, if you will, there, and very good at her job. So Freddie sort of, she takes Freddie under her wing. And I'm really proud of the books. There's 5 of them. We covered tornadoes, hurricanes, thunderstorms. I did a flash flood, and we did the big blizzard. And when I go out to schools, I mean, I'm sure you guys know this when you go out and talk to kids. Kids are excited talking about weather.
They do.
They love it. They love talking about the storm that went through their neighborhood when the power went out. And I think if you tap into that excitement, then you can take the scare out of potentially dangerous situations. So really proud of the Freddie series. And I'm in talks right now to start maybe a Freddie animation. So cross your fingers on that.
All right.
Great.
Yeah, exciting.
Wow.
Sesame Street on line 1.
Come on.
Listen. I won't lie, Janice. When I first reached out to you, it was because I saw you were doing that Freddie the Frogcaster book series.
Yep.
And I just thought that was a great idea. That was actually the first reason that I reached out to you.
Love it.
And I'll be honest, I I forgot that I was going to ask you, hey, can I get one of those books for my kids?
Of course. Oh my gosh, I'll send you all books. I'll send you all books. The only thing is I need to have one of those fancy Stormfront t-shirts.
I think we can probably work that out.
That's the deal.
Yeah. And a cup too.
Design you up right now. We'll do that.
I like it. Everybody gets Freddie. Freddie for everybody.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
But
All
you're
right, so
right,
Janice-
like the kids really get into it. Once you I don't think my kids have ever really been afraid of weather, because I've always talked to them about it since they were real little.
Well, I think that's the point too. If we didn't do what we do you think I wouldn't be able to explain why a tornado happens, or what happens with a hurricane, the ingredients that you need, or why a thunderstorm happens. I think, parents who don't study weather, it's hard for them to really tell kids what happens in the atmosphere in a simplistic way, because you can get very technical and then you're like, what? So that's, what I wanted to balance at the back of the book. So there's the story that, that tells the story about Freddie and his weather adventures. But at the back of the book, I also have a glossary of real meteorological terms that if you really want to get into it with your kids, you can talk about the science behind it. Yeah.
Good.
I quiz my kids too. Like if I see precipitation bouncing off the windshield, what is it?
Nice.
I quiz them. It's bouncing. What is it?
I love it.
Do you grade their papers then too?
A little bit.
Okay.
A little bit.
My kids don't care one bit.
They
Cannot be
don't
my
care?
kids. I'm sorry?
They don't care about weather?
No interest at all. Zero. I've got 3 boys and they could care less.
Wow.
I don't even think they know I was on the Weather Channel. I really don't.
Really?
So like, I can't believe it. Anyway.
So Janice, that's a pretty good segue. So what got you interested in weather? Some people say it's when they were kids. Some people say it was a weather event. What kind of started your interest for this?
Listen, I've always been interested in weather. It's interesting that I kind of did it backwards, that I started with the sort of the journalism, the reporting, the classic rock DJ. I think all of those careers actually has led me to this moment. I feel like, I'm a better broadcaster and I'm better at, getting messages out there because of my background and what I did before doing weather. But going back, I mean, listen, I'm from Canada where, Ice storms shut our city down for weeks. We had a big ice storm in Ottawa in the 90s that I remember the National Guard had to come in, and it was all about it was neighbors helping neighbors. We didn't have power for many days. And I was fascinated by how do they know how this is going to happen? And, how do you prepare for something like this? So I always had an interest in weather. My mom, it's funny, some people will say, what advice did your mom give you growing up? And I just always remember her saying, don't go out in freezing rain. Don't drive in freezing rain. I mean, that was Ottawa. That was like freezing rain. It was like the big thing. And it really would coat highways and roadways and cause havoc. So the interest was there. It was always there. So when CBC back home, when I was DJing actually at the time, I did a lot of part-time television on the side. And the program director at CBC said to me, I would really love to get you into television some way. Have you ever done weather before? And I said, no. But back then, you just had to have a great personality, and they hired you, and you learn the trade while you were there. Nowadays, you can't do that. Unfortunately, you have to. And I agree, like the education is very important. But I still believe in that old school. You do the weather when the weather is nasty and you get your message across. But if the weather's great, let's have a good time, let's have fun with it.
Let's show cute puppies.
Let's show cute puppies.
And kittens. Don't forget the kittens. Come on.
Cat video.
Gotta have a cat video when it's sunny outside.
That's right.
So tell us about this Hall of Fame thing. That is so cool.
Yeah.
It is cool. I'll tell you, I had never done Groundhog Day in Punxsutawney. So first of all, it was a bucket list. It was a bucket list thing to do. A Groundhog Day with Bill Murray is one of maybe my top movie. I love that movie. I've seen it a million times. I had the VHS copy, and it's completely ruined because I watched it so much. So you always have that, that idea of what Punxsutawney is going to be like. So they contacted me. The Freddie series helped with that. Once the word got across that I was helping kids understand weather with these books, they got in touch with me and said, we really like the message that you're, bringing to kids, talking about school safety and weather and how we can prepare in advance. And we would love to nominate you for our Weathercasting Hall of Fame. And we've got some Weather Channel people there. I mean, Jim Cantori is there and Stephanie Abrams is there. So I was like, what? Are you sure? Are you talking to me? So it was an amazing moment because I got to be there for Groundhog Day, and then I got to be there for the big induction. And I brought my two sons with me and my husband. We shared that moment. We got to see this beautiful, amazing, adorable town. And we got to meet the groundhog, which, it was an amazing moment.
Now, do you have a good hat?
I always have good hats.
When you're in Punxsutawney, you need the crazy hat.
When we were there, we bought several hats. And I'm addicted because I went online this year so that I would have a crazy hat to wear on Fox and Friends. We didn't get to go this year to Groundhog Day, but I want to go back next year. I'm an alumni now.
Yes,
that's nice.
Yeah.
So you got to meet Cantori, and you probably got to at least see him and see Jen Carfagna.
Yeah,
I love them.
There, yeah.
Yeah, I love Jen. I love Jim. They're both really cool people.
Yeah, they're good people.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, so where do you
ahead.
go from where you're going? Like, what's next? What's the pinnacle? You're at the pinnacle, aren't you?
I listen. I feel like I've been there for 15 years. I've been at Fox, and I was saying this today that. Listen, we're in this really weird political climate where it's like everybody is at each other and everybody's angry. And I'm really glad that I get to do the weather. Like there are times like today where I got into the weeds a little bit because sometimes I feel like I want to be neutral, but there are things out there that really bother me. And I'm like, sometimes I have an opinion and then I'll go back to the weather. I don't do it very often. I did that today. If you go on Twitter, you'll see what I've posted, but I'm very grateful for the job that I do. And I love the place that I work. I mean, listen, people talk about Fox News and they say terrible things about us, but when you go there and you meet the people I work with, it's like a family. Honestly, the crew that I work with, I don't care who they voted for. I don't know who they voted for, but we work together well. And if you work mornings, it's very, you're up at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's a weird it's a weird club that you're in. So you need people who have got your backs. And I feel that. I feel like this is the best job that I've ever had. You know, I get it. I understand we're into this weirdness right now with everybody sort of at each other. And I hate that about what's going on. But I feel like weather brings everyone together. Everyone experiences the weather, right? So I feel lucky that, you know, they go to me and I say I do fair and balanced weather. East Coast, West Coast, everywhere in
It doesn't
between.
matter what party you are, you can get hit by a tornado.
That's right. That's exactly it. Yeah.
All right. Hey, I've got a question for you. So you have a past with Imus in the morning.
Oh.
So here's my question. I want to know, what's the craziest story you've got working in that jungle?
There's a lot of crazy stories, and you know, I haven't talked about Imus a lot, but you know what? You've got an exclusive right now, okay? Because I haven't. Okay,
nice.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Okay, so I am coming out with a book next year. You know, I write children's books. Well, one of the editors at HarperCollins recently wrote me a couple of months ago, and he said, Janice Dean, I know you write children's weather books, but do you have an adult book in there somewhere, like a memoir? Because you've got all these things that have happened to you over the years. And, you know, if you follow me, you know that I'm pretty open and honest about the journey that I've had. I've been diagnosed with MS for 13 years now. I have multiple sclerosis, and I'm pretty open about my, you know, what I do outside of the weather and the experiences that I've had. I haven't really talked about Imus because Imus was a really difficult, challenging job. He wasn't a nice person, and he wasn't good to me either. So I did that job. That job actually brought me to New York, which I'm always grateful for. I mean, if I hadn't come to New York and done that job, I wouldn't have met my husband. I wouldn't have met my children. So I'm grateful for that. But it was an abusive job. He wasn't a nice person. And, you know, the people that worked with him, some of them were great people. But it was a tough job. So having said that, I cover a lot of this in this book that I'm going to be publishing in April of next year. So I will tell you this, it was a challenging moment. I'm not sure why he didn't particularly like me and said a lot of mean, nasty things to me off camera and on camera. But I did write a chapter on it, and I promise to come back when it's out there, and I will, you know, get right.
I want to read that.
Yeah, me too.
Because we've all, like,
we've all been there,
we've
right?
all had it. We've all
Yeah,
had
we
it.
have.
We've all had that one. Yeah.
You know, and listen,
I appreciate you being so honest, because sometimes you get people, and I'm not saying even on this podcast, but you get people on air that are like, oh, it was fine, it was good, and they water it down, and you just want to hear the truth.
Listen, for many years I did that. For many years I didn't talk about it. And now I feel like there's an opportunity. We're into sort of this movement of being honest and saying, listen, calling out bad behavior, and I'm calling out the bad behavior. I mean, it was to the point where I had to leave, and thank goodness that Fox hired me, because it got me out of a pretty bad situation, unfortunately.
Dina,
Dina,
which people on this podcast?
I was looking right at you.
I saw it. I'm like, hey, everywhere I move, she's
you know, when Janice said too that, you know, we're in that climate where we are standing up for ourselves more. The great thing about this changing climate is that people are listening now.
Yeah, it's true.
It's not just complaining or trying to get help.
No,
it's that it's actually getting, like, we're actually moving forward.
Yes. And listen, it is, you have to, there's a fine line we walk, like, you know, because we're going to have bosses or people that bother us or do silly things or say stupid things. And that's just part of life. We have to deal with that. But then there are people who are abusive and mean and have no right to treat people that way. So I feel like we're living in a moment right now where people are being embraced for speaking their truth. And, you know, I'm grateful for that. Listen, like I said, I'm grateful for the opportunity to come to New York, because I can't imagine my life the way it was, you know, not having my children, not having my husband. But it was certainly a difficult time. Not to bring the room down. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no,
Wait a minute, let me fill my drink.
It's Phil's fault. Really.
yeah, it is Phil's fault. Come on.
Phil!
This was one of the rules we went over. You can't bring the room down, Phil. Come on.
Let me change it up. I'm going to change it up. So why did you move to the States, and why did you want to get out of Canada so bad? That's what I want to know.
Oh my
A.
gosh.
You got to say A though.
See, this podcast, it's only an hour, and I feel like I have all these stories to tell you. So I moved out of New York, or rather, I moved out of Canada originally to follow a boy to Houston, okay, an ex-boyfriend. So I moved to Houston. I have dual citizenship. My father was American. I was able, he moved to Canada, met my mom, gave up his U.S. citizenship, but back in the 80s with the free trade agreement, he had an ability to actually get back his U.S. citizenship, and in turn doing that, his kids were able to become dual citizens. So I'm very grateful for that, because I wouldn't be here without that, I don't think. So I moved to Houston for a number of years. I did radio and television there. The relationship didn't work out. I moved back to Canada for less than a year, and that's when a coworker of mine came up with the IMUS job and said, oh, you'd be really good at this. And on paper, it was a perfect job for me. It had radio, it had television, it had news. And so that's how I moved to New York. But yeah, I've been in the States now probably most of my adult life.
Janice, I could have told you Canada to Texas, it's not going to work out.
Truth. Yeah, and listen, you know what? I met some of the best friends that I have in my life in Houston, Texas. So, Houston served its purpose of, I was able to build my career, and I was also able to meet some great, fabulous friends. And I'm still in touch with the ex-boyfriend.
Wow.
Now, that's actually a pretty good segue into my question. So I've seen you've covered Harvey, Irma, Sandy, Irene, Earl, Katrina. Do you like hurricanes more than other storms? And B, what was your favorite or least favorite, and why?
Listen, hurricanes are like, take out the devastation that what happens with the hurricanes. But hurricanes are like a storyline. In the cable news business, we do the weather report. We get like a minute if we're lucky, sometimes a minute 30. But when we have a big weather story, that is our time to really, get out there and warn the public. And with hurricanes, it's like an unfolding story that can go many days, 5, 7, 10 days, right? Mm-hmm. So I feel like with hurricanes, there's more of a preparation plan. There's more of an ability to warn people in advance. Obviously with tornadoes, you do the best you can. You show them the area of concern. You make sure that they know what a watch or a warning looks like and what to do. But a hurricane really is sort of, an unfolding event that the nation really wants to know about. So I find that with hurricanes, there seems to be a little bit more of an interest. Not to say that other big weather phenomenons like blizzards and tornadoes don't take precedence. They do. They can be obviously very dangerous. But for me, the biggest storm I ever covered was Katrina. However, I will say this, that with the information coming out about Maria having reportedly, sad. Oh my gosh, man. It's devastating. So I think to myself, if it's true and over 4,000 people died in Hurricane Maria, then that has to be the biggest tragedy that I've ever covered.
Definitely. Yeah. And it's so sad because some of that was preventable.
Yeah, absolutely. So Hurricane Sandy was a big one too. Big one for me because I was the first official broadcaster that went on the air to tell people that it was making its curve towards the Northeast. The Euro many days out was showing the scenario where it was going into the Northeast, but the GFS and the other computer models weren't quite there. But the day that all of the computer models and the cone of uncertainty started to go towards the Northeast, it came out right before the 11 a.m. advisory. I had an 11:30 coming up on Fox, and I called our executive producer and said, we have to go on air and you have to do a Fox News alert because there's the potential of this to do incredible damage to the Northeast, including New York City. So it's on record that I was the first national meteorologist to go on.
Bam!
Wait a minute. I think I was. Hang on a second.
Let's do it. Let's go. But I'm sure the Weather Channel was all over it, but for cable news, for the national weather, it was a big deal. And I took a lot of flack for that as overhyping and scare tactics and screaming.
They always say that, though.
I know they do. And I always say I'd rather people be over-prepared than under-prepared. I'd rather tell people and get them mad at me that I got the wrong forecast than have people unprepared and not knowing what to do.
So Janice, are you, because you're animated right now, are you, when you get excited, like you're like, hey, Sandy's coming, you know, or, I mean, do you consider yourself above average?
I'm definitely above average.
You have to be, yeah.
I think I've always been like that. I think, you know, I do think that's part of my personality. I think you could ask my kids and I'm like, you know, get your clothes on. But I've always been like that. So, but I feel like it's important. And like I said, I would rather get people listening to the television because there's so much noise out there. And if I can do that, I'll take the flack of people being angry if I get the forecast wrong or what have you. But Sandy was an important one. Yeah.
Janice, do you get an amount of time that you want for situations like that, or do they dictate how much time you get?
No, hurricanes, they are pretty good about giving me a lot of time. During normal weather segments, I wish I had a little more time, but when it's important and like I've been there for so long that they know that if I say to them, you have to give me more time to warn people, they do it. Yeah.
What's the most time you've been given?
Oh my gosh. Well, usually if there's breaking news and I'm on with Shepard Smith, it's just him and I sometimes. I mean, when we were going through the hurricane season of 2004, 2005, it was just him and I. You know, it literally was like, and then if we had a reporter on scene, we would go. So there's been cases where I've probably been on the air nonstop, maybe, 20, 25 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
All right. So Janice, one of the last questions.
Yeah.
Do you prefer Janice Dean, the weather machine, or Janice Dean, the weather queen?
Oh.
Those are two good ones, Brady.
I may have not come up with those, but
that's okay. That's okay. I like weather machine because I talk about Shepard Smith. He was the one that came up with that. When I first started at Fox, he was doing rehearsals with me before I went on air with Fox. And he's so funny. I mean, if you ever watch him, he's the smartest guy I know. He's so brilliant. You can always tell his wheels are turning. So I'm in the studio with him. And he's like, Janice Dean, Janice Dean, Janice Dean, Janice Dean, the weather machine. So I was like, okay, I will own that. And it's stuck ever since. And who knew that would be on the cover of like children's books? It's fantastic.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Hey, Janice, tell all our listeners, viewers, how can they find you on social media?
Oh my goodness. At Janice Dean is the Twitter. Instagram is Janice Dean FNC, and then it's Janice Dean on Facebook. Yeah.
Okay. So you have a Facebook account, huh?
I do. Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of people are ditching that. I'm considering it.
And I understand it. I get it. It's crazy. I totally understand now.
The Stormfront Freaks is now available on the Weather Store. Come shop our catalog of shirts, hats, and hoodies, all with our Stormfront Freaks logo and Outbreak logo. Plus, you'll find all your other favorite weather geek and storm chasing gear, footwear, and accessories. Visit the Weather Store at thewxstore.com, the exclusive supplier of the Stormfront Freaks.
Mesoscaleforecast.com brings us StormNet, a state-of-the-art deep learning model designed to revolutionize severe weather forecasting. The innovative tool is tailored to provide unparalleled real-time predictions of severe weather events, including probability of wind, hail, and tornadoes. And now they've added Hurricane Vision, a cutting-edge hurricane track and intensity prediction system that uses deep artificial intelligence to predict the track and future intensity of tropical cyclones. You've seen us use it on our Stormfront Freaks live outbreak coverage with Meteorologist Stormcat 5. Now you can use it as well. Visit Mesoscaleforecast.com and access live data subscriptions. Plus, when you enter the code Stormfront, you'll receive a 10% discount for life. Yes, for life. Go to Mesoscaleforecast.com.
Great.
All right. You know what? We're always working on it. So hey, we got Rick Reichmuth. He's the chief meteorologist at Fox News Channel. Before joining Fox, Rick worked as a live weather anchor for WSI Weather Services International, CNN, CNN Headline News, and CNN International, which I'm sure is a story in itself going from CNN to Fox. We won't get into that right. Rick graduated from Arizona State University with a degree in Spanish literature, perfect for weather, by the way. Yes. And after a decade in banking, I'm still trying to connect the dots on this one, but Spanish literature, 10 years in banking, then to pursue a lifelong dream at Georgia State University and Mississippi State to complete a broadcast meteorology program. He also started his own line of Weatherman umbrellas in 2017, which officially makes you an entrepreneur then as well. So banking to weather, which is interesting because I went from weather to finance.
Okay.
But so how did you go from there to there?
Oh, it's a really long story, which would take up your entire hour-long podcast. But basically, I was accidentally in banking, and just was fairly decent at it, and kept on getting promoted, and I hated every second of it. And when I was 30, I thought, if I keep doing this, I'm going to end up being 50 and miserable still doing this. So since I was a little kid, I always wanted to be a weatherman. And so I just quit the bank one day and went to change careers, and it worked out.
Most people hate getting promoted all the time, I hear.
Well, it wasn't that. It's just like, it can be a dangerous thing. You get going and, when you're young, you make a little more money and you think it's exciting, and it becomes a trap. And I thought, if I don't do this now, it'll never happen. So I quit. I just started figuring out how to go into weather, and that was it. And it all worked out.
And living the dream, right?
Yeah. So how do you go, Rick, from obviously being in the banking industry and at that age, 30 and, making money to go, hey, I'm going to go back to school, pay somebody else to teach me and not make any money. What did you have some kind of a opportunity leeway there where there was
like a big bank account
income? How were you able to do that? Because that's a big step for people to take when they're already. Were you married at the time?
No.
Okay, so there was
that also helps.
Yeah, a little bit.
That you have a little bit more freedom. It you know what? I think it was for one thing, I had a little bit of money that I put in my 401k from the bank. I'll give you all of it here. And I spent every last dime in the transition. So at some point I was literally down to like $1.25 in my.
Oh my God.
Picked up random jobs. I started bartending someplace in the meantime to get a little bit of money. And I had never bartended. I didn't even really drink much at the time. I do now.
Until this whole
process. So, I kind of learned in the process that I think I was very naive. Had I known what I was in for, what it would take, I probably never would have done it. But when you're naive, you just think, I'm sure I can figure that out. And I just started telling anybody I would meet that I was going to be a weatherman. And eventually you start meeting people who know people who love to kind of help you out. And I think in life, most people hate what they do. And when they see somebody out there who's going to do something that they want to do, they love to get behind them because they know maybe it gives them a dream that they could do that too. So a lot of people helping me along the way. I got very lucky in one day I met somebody, they took my resume into CNN. I lived in Atlanta, and the full kind of just really crazy story. So I speak Spanish because of my Spanish Lit degree. And I got a call, and the person who was basically the secretary in the Spanish network committed suicide. And like that Monday, they called and they said, hey, we need a temp at CNN en Español. Can you come in? So I went in and I sat in this office, and it was a weird environment. I didn't know what had happened, and nobody was talking to me, and I didn't know how to be a secretary. And so I literally was teaching myself how to type and teaching myself like Word and these sorts of things.
Wow.
And then after a couple of weeks, the bosses pulled me into their office. They're like, who are you, 30-year-old guy sitting in our office being a secretary? And I was like, I want to be a weatherman. And, I quit a bank after 10 years. And these guys got behind me and taught me everything they knew about TV. They let me go and leave during the day to go and take meteorology classes that I started at Georgia State, and then did the Mississippi State program. And after about a year and a half of doing this, so I would also go in and practice with Chad Myers, who you mentioned you had on our show, was one of the first people who I started doing a little bit of work with. And I would just practice in the evenings and the mornings and weekends. And then I'd take a tape back and they'd critique it and say, don't do that, don't wear that, don't stand like that, don't talk like that. And after about a year and a half, I had a tape that was ready and I was sending out to people, like to local stations. And I got a call one day from Headline News and they said, hey, Rick, we need somebody tomorrow and we hear you can do this, or can you work tomorrow? I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And,
now it's time.
actually, I was like, yes. And then I'm sorry, I'm giving you the longer story. I'll shut up in just a second.
It's good.
No, we
Good.
want it.
So-
This is incredible.
So I said yes, thinking like, oh, I can do this. And then the next morning, I went out that night and I bought a bunch of clothes because I didn't have any clothes to wear. So I bought clothes to like, be on TV for the first time. And they, at the time, Fox or CNN had let go of like 4 of their regular people. Flip Spice, I don't know if you knew who that is, and they'd let some of these people go. So they needed some freelancers. But meantime, they'd hired this spectacularly beautiful woman. I don't know, Rosie Etta, if you know who she is. She's in Canada now, but she's, like 6'2", and she had been an 3-time Olympian, just this amazingly beautiful woman. And I go in and she's standing there and I'm in these like dumpy clothes that I bought at Dillard's or something the night before. And I thought, oh my God, I can't do this. What am I thinking? And sure enough, I couldn't really back out. Chad Myers walked me over to Headline News to show me where to go that time. And I went there and the anchor went to toss to me and I couldn't hear the anchor because my heartbeat was beating so loud in my ear.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't hear a word she said. And anyway, it proves that in television, nobody inside the building is actually watching what is happening on television. They're working on preparing their next segment that needs to be on or their next show, but nobody's watching what is on television because it was a disaster, but I was a warm body and they kept on putting me on. So that was it. Then I kept the job I'll finish this off in a second. For basically 3.5 years then, I started working on all the CNN networks, freelancing, doing weather, and I kept my job, which due to some layoffs became really secretarial. So I would be like getting my boss coffee and whatever, but I would do the Headline News morning show with Robin Meade. And that my last hit was at 8:45, and at 9 o'clock I would be bringing my boss in coffee, like, here, sir, here's your coffee.
Oh my God.
And I did that for 3.5 years until I realized they weren't going to give me a full-time job, and then I left. So
was there a time, Rick, when you were bartending and you were a secretary and going to classes that you thought, what did I do? Why did I leave? Or I mean, were there times that you really had serious doubts?
Never, to be honest with
Really?
you. I hated what I had been doing up until that point. Felt so incongruous with my soul that from that day, anything after that felt like I was at least alive doing something I was supposed to be doing. So it never felt bad. It was hard and it was terrifying, and but I never doubted it. The probably the best piece of advice that I ever got, that day I got on Headline News, my boss pulled me into his office and he said, Rick, you should feel more accomplished. You've done more than 95% of people have in their TV career. He said, now we'll see if you have the stomach for this business. And I remember thinking, well, I have no idea what you're talking about. I can't imagine it takes my stomach for this business. And I thought about that comment for probably about the next 8 years, at least maybe 3 to 4 times a week when something would be happening. I'd be thinking, I can't do this, or this is tough. But I think the fact that he said it made me always say, I have to prove I have the stomach for it. And it was great advice. It kept me going.
So would banking have been better if they'd added a keg to your office back then?
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. Let me clarify. I am not at the Fox office. I'm at my side gig office.
Right. I see your Weatherman logo behind you. But hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to ask Rick a little bit more about maybe some of the storms that he's covered, some of the more memorable ones that he's had. But we'll take a short break. Go ahead and refill your drink, and we'll be right back with Rick.
Perfect.
All right, hey, welcome back, everybody. Here with Rick Reichmuth from Fox News. And Rick, we were talking a little bit about obviously how you transition, and I really think, I do think that's really a good inspiration. I think people need to hear that story.
Yeah.
Because I do think there are a lot of people, and a lot of our listeners, to be honest with you, that have dreamed of being in weather or want to be in weather, and they just, for whatever reason, they haven't made the step, or they think the step's too big. And I think that's great inspiration that, heck, you can leave a good job, good paying job, industry, and suck it up, man. If it's something you want to do, you do what it takes to do that. But I want to find out a little bit about, since you got into meteorology, all the various storms. I've read a little bit that you've covered some big tornadoes and hurricanes, and I kind of want to find out what are some of the more memorable ones to you, and why were they so memorable?
Yeah, I think without a doubt, it was the spring of 2011 where there were all of the tornadoes and the flooding along the Mississippi. That period there for about 3 months was a really, obviously, a incredibly tragic time with so many storms, but also I spent basically the better part of that time out in the field covering all of those storms and just staying out in the field because there were so many going on, and seeing obviously the weather, which is thrilling to me, but then the interaction of that with people and the human side of it was, incredibly moving. All of that, I would say, culminated in the Tuscaloosa tornado. And I had been the night before, the day before that, the Tuscaloosa day, that is just, probably 100 miles west of that, there were storms going through Mississippi. And I had arrived at this town, a small town in Mississippi, and a high school had been hit. And it was about a week before graduation. And I remember these guys telling these guys at this place, I had booked up stuff for the morning show, interviews that we were going to do. People were going to come on, like high school kids who their school was ripped apart, graduating the next week. And right in the middle of that, the Tuscaloosa tornado is going on. And so I had to go back and say, like, guys, sorry, the fatalities of the 4 people who had died there, and all of these stories now suddenly don't mean as much because there's bigger stories going somewhere else. And then I arrived in Tuscaloosa about an hour after that tornado went through. And it was such a hard thing to, like, it's just that dilemma in news that, the size and scope of stories completely outweighs the other stories. And one becomes, unfortunately, more important just because of the kind of the quantity or the severity of it. But the individuals' lives who were touched by all of them kind of is the same story. But the Tuscaloosa one by far was the only time where I actually began to cry on TV. And I had been there, arrived there in the morning on air as the sun rose. It was the same day as the Prince, whatever the older Prince boy got married, Prince Harry, not Harry, the other one, William.
Yep,
Prince William got married. Yeah, sorry, Prince William. And I remember, like, the channel had put all this energy and sent all these people over to London for the wedding, and it was this big thing. And then suddenly that story didn't matter because this story mattered more. And but all morning long, they were looking for bodies in the debris all around me. And at about 5 o'clock that evening, there was like a 1-year-old kid that they couldn't find. And about 5 o'clock that evening, they found the baby like 30 feet from where I was standing. And it was, it's a hard thing to figure out what to do with that. You also, I think, when you experience that, you never, you kind of turn off the emotion for anything past that. It's hard to, you can't stay in that state of sadness. But I love the weather and I love the storytelling around it, and those kinds of things by far the biggest impact. But that day, bar none, was the one that impacted me the most.
When's the last time you've been out in the field?
Probably within the last year.
Okay.
Somewhere I can't remember exactly which one it was.
Do you like being in the field, or do you like kind of being in the station?
No, I love it. I love it. The thing that is probably the hardest about it is, this is just the state of news nowadays, that politics trumps everything, and wrong word, but politics, takes over everything. And, so there isn't as much of an appetite, certainly not a long lasting appetite for these things. Hurricanes we cover so intensely, and there's just a few of us, as Janice Dean and Adam Klotz is the other meteorologist, and so we'll go round the clock for a couple of days. And so hurricanes, I never get to go out in the field when they're happening. I'll go out sometimes afterwards. But other ones, it's literally, even within news now, it used to be that like 5 fatalities, we would send a crew there, and I would go out to that like the day after to cover a storm. That threshold of number, especially even after Tuscaloosa and then Joplin, when these numbers started going so big, and I think even the same thing happened a little bit with Katrina, that the new threshold for what deserves coverage keeps going higher and higher.
That's kind of scary.
In order for, and I think you can see it even in like school shootings now. We see a shooting that kills 4 people, and that's not a big deal. It takes 20 for us to, all these things in our society. We see all the tragedies, and they only really sink in if it's bigger than the prior tragedy. I just went way off on a huge tangent for you there. Sorry.
Well, I am. Go ahead, Mass.
I was going to say, and it probably depends on which station you're at too, for what news carries more weight than the other.
Sure. Well, I think like MSNBC doesn't do a lot of weather. I'm just talking the cable channels. CNN used to do a lot. They don't do nearly what they used to do. Fox, we used to do a lot more. We don't do as much, but at least in those channels they do. I think you see like in ABC, they seem so committed to weather. They do weather almost every night in their nightly newscast, with Ginger or with Rob. So I think it definitely does. And then local news, obviously, weather still reigns.
Yeah, but those have got to be like hard conversations, because you're talking about, going and covering something, but it's people's lives, and that I can't imagine that conversation that's had, whether you decide to go or not. And that's probably not an easy one.
I always want to go. I would rather be there than in the studio, like at any time, just because I think at every one of those, you're gaining experience and gaining information and understanding more about, for one, about storytelling and about people's lives and what weather does. The other thing is you end up just learning a lot about, weather and geography and travel. I think travel around anywhere in the country makes you a far better meteorologist, just so you can even understand, like, hey, there's some hills to the west of whatever city, or Amarillo's at 4,000 feet, so you might not think they're getting, upslope winds, but they are. Or, there's a river that cuts right through the town, and that one is prone to flooding. Or Fargo, the river runs north instead of south.
You were just in Arizona. Did you see any haboobs?
I did not see any haboobs.
No.
I was at somebody's house though, who had taken a picture of a haboob out their window, and they had put it on their wall, and it was great.
Oh my God.
You had to go there, Phil. You had to go there, didn't you? Have you traveled to every state now, or what's the farthest you've traveled to? You where?
I'm missing 2. I'm missing 2 states. I'm missing Alaska and Montana.
Oh, those are good ones.
Good ones. Yeah. I'm missing those 2 states.
Well, I'll tell you what. So you were talking a little bit, Rick, about political climate and whether you're CNN or you're Fox News, what are the challenges? You're just trying to be a meteorologist and report the weather and the facts and the science. What are the challenges you have working at a station like that in the current political climate?
Well, like just getting oxygen is the biggest challenge.
Sure. Oh my God.
But I think that I think TV, like weather and meteorologists and messaging, is hard enough just because we're explaining tough concepts to average people. They don't seem that tough if you're a meteorologist, but to put them all together, they seem hard, especially when one place can be under 4 different kinds of warnings at one time, do different things and whatever. And messaging around Florence, we just saw this, like a Cat 4 down to a Cat 2. Now nobody cares because it's a Cat 2, but you're not realizing, well, the flooding is going to be worse than anything you've ever seen. And all of those messaging things are really hard. The thing that makes it harder is that within news, everybody, and you guys, I'm sure, are in the same way into podcasts. You want people to listen to you and you want people to hear you. TV wants people to keep watching them, and they want people to not turn the channel away from you. And so writers for a show have to write the intro to a segment to sell that segment. Mm-hmm. And they're not an expert in anything they're writing about, because they're writing about a different thing at every minute. But they're trained to write a monster storm, wicked weather, evil storm of the century, whatever. Yeah. And you don't want to make the anchor who didn't write it, but had to read it. You don't want to make them seem like they're making a mistake for a couple of reasons. One, they could ruin my career in a second if, there is a power differential in that space. But also just out of respect for somebody, you don't want to throw them under the bus. At the same time, you want to get the message straight.
Yep.
I can't let you get away with calling it the storm of the century if it's not, or, a monster gigantic storm if it's like a really small one, or, all of those things. So how to create the right tone and expectation of a storm. And I am also very aware that we get blamed for the storms going wrong based off of the intro that the anchor read. If you say the nor'easter of the year, worst nor'easter of the year, and then it comes in, you get like 2 inches. You're like, well, no, we said we would end up with, whatever, 2 to 4 inches, but you wrote it as this thing, that first impression of what people are imagining. I think that's the hardest thing that we face in news, is how to manage expectations.
So you've never ticked off one of your anchors and stuff and been like, oh, what the heck are no?
Oh, I have.
Let me
I for sure have, and we've had some fights around it a little bit where I've pissed them off. But I try now to write internal memos that explain, like after Florence was downgraded and anchors were on the air saying like, well, it's a weaker storm, it's getting better, which gives the viewer and the person living there the idea like, hey, maybe it's not gonna be that bad. I think I can stay in my home. I'll wait this out. You don't realize, no, a storm that stalls there for 48 hours is gonna, So to try to create context around it for everybody, but in a cable news environment, it's a 24-hour news cycle. The amount of people that you're having to communicate with to try to get that information across is it's a challenge, but we have to keep that challenge going,
So you ever like email Bob, your little technique, you go, Bob, just to let you know, I can always go back to banking. What are you going to do?
I still would never want to go back to banking.
Don't let them know that.
Yeah, it's not a very strong threat.
That's true.
Not a very strong threat. So tell us a little bit, Rick, what's been the inspiration behind your new Weatherman umbrella venture? I guess what was the inspiration to go, hey, I'm going to go into business now and create umbrellas?
A live shot gone bad? No way.
So to be honest with you, kind of the same, just being naive, like I thought when I was changing careers the first time. Not that I'm changing careers now, but I like probably 6 or 7 years ago, I was standing in front of a rack of umbrellas trying to find an umbrella. And I thought, I'm sure most of these suck because umbrellas suck. But maybe there's a good one, but why don't we know what it is? Like, every other brand that is the good one in that category, like I might buy a generic Kleenex, or I can buy Kleenex, but Kleenex is going to be better. Or, you can buy Beats headphones, or, whatever the category is, you know, at least what is a quality one in that. I thought, why don't we know what that is? And then I just thought, I bet I could tell people what the quality umbrella is, just because I'm a meteorologist. So for about 2 years ago, I just started telling people like, I'm going to make an umbrella one day. I'm going to make an umbrella. And then finally it was like, Rick, shut up if you're not going to do it, because you're starting to sound stupid. And so I really thought, really naively, like, oh, this is going to be fun. And so the same thing I did when I was going to be weatherman, by the way, I set a little goal that just to do one thing every day, just one thing, like figure out how to get a URL, buy that URL,
I tell my co-hosts, I tell my co-hosts every day to do that to make our podcast better, but
it's not going to happen.
No way.
Yeah, maybe tomorrow.
But just do one thing. So anyway, I started doing it, and then next thing I knew, I had like designs and prototypes, and I was trying to find factories to do it. And then I realized like, oh, I'm out of my own money. I need to find other people's money, which means how do you do that? Oh, you have to write a business plan. I don't know how to write a business plan. And they keep asking people up for help. And next thing you know, like it turned into my head, like I want this to be like a gigantic company that, you know, like now everybody buys a Yeti cooler instead of you. And like,
well, not everybody.
Yeah, true, fair.
Stay away from Yetis.
But you know, it's like, hey, if you want to buy a good umbrella, I want everybody to know where there's a place you can go and you can get it. So
do you have like categories like this is a category 1 umbrella? This is a category. It's good for F5s, you know, that type of thing.
I don't, but I like it. I might use it.
1% royalty.
Like
1% royalty.
This is the Shark Tank. We didn't tell you, but this is the Shark Tank. Welcome.
Do I say you fired?
So tell us, Ray, what makes them unique? What have you done with your umbrellas to make them special? And
all right, so we initially started out with like completely brand new designs, and then that was impossible. It took a lot of money because you have to. I didn't know this, but you have to make each mold. So every mold becomes a more expensive thing to do. You know, like every mold costs about $5,000 to make. So ended up basically searching high and low for the best starting point. And then after taking apart probably, I don't know, 300 umbrellas in my apartment, figuring out the weak
Thanks
points.
for not calling for help on that.
Yeah, right. My dogs are really afraid of umbrellas, by the way. A bummer for them. Anyway, and then remaking some of the molds, strengthening them, thickening them, changing the material of them, moving them to a different spot that makes it a little bit more wind resistant. And the ultimate goal, the only thing I cared about at the beginning was a wind resistant. Like I just wanted to be as strong in the wind. Then I realized there's some other things that are bad about umbrellas, like they force your hand into a weird position automatically, or it's got some really creepy grip on it. So, you know, made like something that feels good in your hand. It's really comfortable. It doesn't like get sticky or weird on it. Every one of them has reflective piping for safety. I've got a friend who's a lawyer, and he's tried 2 cases of people who've been hit by buses in the rain. Like they're underneath their umbrella in the dark, like in New York, especially a black umbrella. The car doesn't see them in the black and they don't see it. So it's a common, you know, you see how it happens. So they have reflective features. Anyway, I realized if you're going to invest in a quality umbrella, you usually don't have that umbrella with you when you need it. So the other piece to that is we made an app. So you get alerts on days that you need your umbrella. And if you don't remember where it is, there's a tracking device. So you hit locate and it tells you where you last had your umbrella. So try to give you the best chance to have your umbrella when you need it. And we have now it's turned into a big thing in my head, and I want to take over the world with this. And so we have all kinds of other ideas around the technology. And probably by the end of next year, we'll launch a rain jacket and just kind of branch out into a few other smart pieces around it. It's called Weatherman, by the way, which I thought would be a name that people could remember.
So also some of the licenses you've made and partnered with, I guess share some of those, because I know you've actually
so the first one we did, back when I was trying to write the business plan, a buddy I have who I knew had written a business plan, I approached him, and he's now my main business partner. He left his job. He had ran ad sales at USA Today Sports and had a great job, and now he is full-time weatherman.
And employee. He's the one running the keg. Is that what he's doing?
Exactly.
Everybody's friend.
Exactly. Anyway, he had a long career in golf primarily before that. So due to some connections, we initially became the official umbrella of the LPGA. So when we launched our golf umbrella, we did it that way. By having that umbrella and making a good golf umbrella, because we have golf umbrellas, Golf Digest this year called us Best Golf Umbrella, which our first year in the business to get that kind of a thing. That's like that's not a paid deal at all. That's just them deciding that was really, really cool. And then also something that we didn't do anything to make happen is we were the official sponsor umbrella of the U.S. Ryder Cup team. So in our first year, we had that also. So just to know that like Tiger and these guys, even though it didn't rain, but they got our umbrella in the bag. Felt really, really cool.
Oh yeah.
So I feel like we're off to a good start.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm inspired. I'm inspired to go do more because I'm not doing enough.
I keep telling you that all the time, Brady.
Oh my God. Shut up, Bill.
Thank you for tuning in to the Stormfront Freaks podcast. You can watch our bi-weekly show live on youtube.com/stormfrontfreaks and download the audio version on your favorite podcast player. For links to our Patreon team of exclusive benefits, show notes, past shows, new videos, merchandise, and more, visit our website at stormfrontfreaks.com. While you're there, check out our interactive chaser radar from our friends at zoomradar.com. If you'd like to contact us with questions or make comments about the show, shoot us an email to questions@stormfrontfreaks.com or follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok. Search for Stormfront Freaks. We'd love to hear from you. Join us next time and tell a friend about the Stormfront Freaks podcast.